Okay, we're back and we're going to finish talking about leadership and the small group and finish this lecture up. So right now I'm going to share the screen. And here we go. So we're left with talking about the myths of leadership. And so one of the myths about leadership is this idea that leadership is you're actually born with it. It's a personality or a trait that you have. And the truth about it is no one is actually born with it. If we go back to talking about how we looked at designated leaders versus emergent leaders, oftentimes, in most cases, that in a small group especially, is people emerge as a leader. It's not something, it's contextual, it's situational, and certain traits come out in people in certain times. You might be the leader, let's say like when you played sports when you were younger. Maybe you were the leader of your team, but now that you're in college, you're not finding yourself leader. Right? So it can be situation and contextual. There can be some people that are more oriented toward wanting to be in charge, but it's not necessarily a personality or a genetic trait. Someone is not born a leader. There's an ideal leadership style, and we haven't talked about leadership styles yet, but we're going to talk about that next. Is leadership styles, it depends upon like what the situation is, or what the community, who the community members are, or who the group members are, or what country it is, what's the history of that society or that culture. So there is no ideal leadership style. Certainly in this country, we have an idea of what a correct or right leadership style is, but there is no ideal one. Right? It depends on the situation. Sometimes if you're in an unruly situation, you need a leader. If you're with young children and they're acting unruly, you need to be strong and perhaps even kind of what we call autocratic, like it's my way, you're going to follow my rules. So it depends on the situation and what kind of leadership style that is necessary. Okay. Another myth that we have that we believe is that leadership get others to work for them. And I think I kind of already talked about this indirectly, that, you know, people that are leaders, the best leaders, and think of people, those of you that are employed or have been employed, your supervisors, your managers, you know, even your teachers. If we as teachers forget about what it was like to be a student, because all of us were students before we became teachers, right? But the best people remember where they came from and know what it feels like to do that work. And so your best managers and your best supervisors, they're not doing it. They don't they're not in those situations because they don't want to do any work or they're trying to get you to do all the work. They're in the situations because they've done that work and they know how to do it well. And they're trying to show you how to do it better. Okay, leadership styles. So there's different kinds of leadership styles. One is called autocratic. This is pretty much kind of like the dictator. It can also be leadership styles that you have, like you can relate this to when we talk about family communication. Sometimes in the family situation, it's what we call autocratic, which means that one parent or the parents rule the house and whatever they say goes. And sometimes that's for the benefit of the children. Sometimes it's just the way their cultural background of how they have learned how to be parents or how to run the family. But in terms of like leadership styles, we relate this to leaders that we think of as dictators in this country, that what we refer to as dictators, autocratic, meaning they have the last word. They decide what's going on. They're not influenced by the popular idea or the popular vote or what the people want. It's about they're guided by their own principles. Democratic leadership is an ideal type of leadership, is where you have You lead by consensus, by what your group wants. Ideally, that's what we have in this country. I'm not sure that's exactly what we have. There's a lot of evidence to the contrary, but ideally, that's what we're after. Laissez-faire leadership is a type of leadership where it's kind of a hands-off. If you're too young to remember laissez-faire economics, but that idea was that people could figure it out for themselves what to do. They don't need leaders. It's kind of like leaderless leadership. And a good example of this would be if we look at the family, like the parents aren't around, latchkey kids, where the kids are kind of have to figure it out on their own what they're supposed to do. You might have this in your small group where you really haven't had anyone taking charge or giving direction to the group. And so you guys have just kind of like been left to your own devices and figuring it out as you go along, but no one's really taking charge of anything. The problem with this can work in some situations. I mean, there's a lot of creativity that can come out of this kind of leaderless leadership, but the problem with this is it can take longer, right, to get things done. Transactional leadership. I like to think of this as that our president is a transactional leader. That transactional leadership is a kind of leadership that means I'll do this for you. If you do this for me, I'll do this for you. That's usually what it goes. If you do this for me, I'll do this for you. Transactional leadership is often the kind of leadership you have with business people or businessmen and women, entrepreneurs. That is the kind of leadership that usually you can also meet people that have that kind of leadership quality. It's an exchange. Transformational leadership. I talked to you about this before. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. King Jr. is the perfect example of transformational leadership. This kind of leadership is all about creating change for the people that you lead. And it's not to benefit that leader, but it's all about working to change the people that you lead, working for that change. And then finally, charismatic leadership is that kind of leadership that someone's really popular and really liked. And you see this a lot in celebrities. They become having in leadership positions like environmentalists, environmental groups, because they're really well liked and they become kind of a spokesperson for certain organizations. Usually that kind of leadership is someone who can guide just on their personality alone. Maybe they won't even be the most principled person, but their personality and their persona is so engaging that people want to follow. And unfortunately, a really good example is Hitler. He was a very charismatic leader. Okay. Let's see where we're at in terms of time. So we have a few more minutes. So this is like, in order to lead, you have to have people follow you. We're going to look at this theory, and I'm just going to go over this briefly, but the distributive leadership theory is really, the principle of this is the group and leadership, the group and the leaders are intertwined. So they can't be, this theory states that whatever happens to the leader happens to the group, whatever happens to the group happens to the leader. So this is this kind of very intertwined, connected kind of leadership. That's what this theory says. And if you think about it, probably in smaller situations, maybe not so much the way you can see this theory if you were to look at, like, if something happened to the president, or like when JFK was shot and assassinated, that affected everyone. He was the leader of the country, and it affected everyone at that time. Let's look at some of these principles. So what they look at is the leaders and the followers, or leaders and a leader and your group members. You create this dynamic between each other, okay? And the idea is the people that aren't the leaders, the followers, are not passive. They have influence over the leader. That's what this theory states. Okay, so the leader's not just telling the followers what to do. The followers have some say and some participation in the interaction with the leader. And also what is particularly important about this is this idea of there's an interplay between the leader and other group members that results in what we call a tension or a push-pull between them. What you think about, and that's what happens with people when they're interacting. Oftentimes there can be some conflict or some push-pull and tension as the leader tries to get their members to do things, and the members push back, or they say, yeah, I want to do this, but I don't really want to do this. You can think about this. Distributive leadership theory could be totally applied to the classroom, right? Let's think about the classroom situation. So I have experience as me as a teacher. So I'm trying to lead by showing you, leading the class through some kind of lecture, or some kind of something that we're doing in class, some kind of activity. And sometimes there is a pushback or a push-pull between student and teacher, right? And in order for the classroom to work, I need you guys, right? I need you guys. I'm interdependent with you. It isn't me just telling you what to do. You're dependent upon me and I'm dependent on you for us to have this whole classroom experience. So distributive theory really can explain like the classroom experience. Okay, we are going to stop right there. And we are going to end this now. And oops, I didn't want that to do that. Go back. There we are. Okay, I went away for a second. You probably still saw me, but I went away. We're going to end this lecture now. And if you have any questions, please put that on the discussion board. Okay, we'll see you guys later.